Hello everyone. This story is about, what if Naruto and Hinata married early? Hope you like it. Let's start. Naruto awoke slowly, then nearly leaped from his bed when he realized he wasn't alone. No, Naruto. Calm down, think, remember, he thought to himself. He opened his eyes and smiled when he saw Hinata. That's right, he slowly remembered, she's here now, with me. I'll never be alone again. He was still staring at her and smiling softly when Hinata awoke and slowly opened her eyes. She had been awake for a few moments, going through most of the same thoughts Naruto had upon awaking. She felt fine, but was confused at first when she felt strong arms around her. Then she opened her eyes, saw Naruto, and the smile on his face, and she couldn't help smiling back. Good morning, Hinata, he said, smiling lovingly at her. Did you sleep well? Yes, Naruto, thank you. She snuggled into his chest, feeling suddenly shy for some odd reason. Naruto smiled at her reaction and held her gently to him, rubbing her back softly. Then his prankster side kicked in, and he started to tickle her, not hard, not mean, just playing. He tickled her sides, her legs, her feet, making her giggle like mad. Hinata was surprised when he started, but soon she was giggling wildly, then she decided to give as good as she got and started tickling Naruto back. Soon both were laughing like maniacs to the point they could barely breathe and both had tears flowing from their eyes. Well, you two seem to be having fun, a voice said, followed by a rather loud laugh. Pervy sage. Naruto yelled, annoyed, after jumping about 5 feet. What in the world are you doing here? Checking up on you two, of course. And honestly, I'm glad you two are so close, he chuckled. It's good to see your parents' wishes coming true. Naruto and Hinata looked at him in confusion, then both remembered what he'd told them about their mothers being best friends, and the two grinned at one another. They didn't care what the old pervert said, they were happy together. Suddenly, Jiraiya had two preteens tackling him and tickling him all over. He gasped in surprise, and then all three were laughing and tickling one another, Jiraiya laughing and thinking how great it was to feel like a kid again. All three felt closer to one another than they'd felt to anyone else in a long time. Naruto felt like he had a family, Hinata felt truly loved by someone other than her father, and Jiraiya, for the first time, felt like he truly was Naruto's godfather. After half an hour of play, the three sat up and panted, finally remembering how to breathe. Naruto kept looking at Hinata and chuckling, which of course made her giggle. Jiraiya was looking from one to the other, looking like he wasn't quite done with either of them, which of course set all three of them to laughing. They spent about an hour like that, just enjoying one another's company, feeling like a family. Naruto couldn't believe that he had these bonds, finally, after all these years. He really wouldn't care if the rest of the village died, but these two, he realized, were precious to him. Well, them and the old man, the Hokage. And Konohamaru, but that's about it. The old man had looked out for him when no one else had when he was just a little kid, so he didn't want him to suffer, and now Hinata and Jiraiya had accepted him and loved him without condition. He slowly realized that he was starting to think of the old pervert as a father, and of course, Hinata was his fiancée. Somewhat absorbed in his thoughts, Naruto sat back and sighed, feeling rather content. What are you thinking about? Hinata, perceptive as always, asked him. Just how precious you two are to me. He took her hand in his and smiled at Jiraiya. Hinata, you're my future, my family. And Jiraiya, you're the closest thing I've had to a father. You both mean so much to me. The two mentioned smiled, Hinata hugged him, and Jiraiya reached over and ruffled his hair affectionately. Thank you both. After this, the three sat in silence for some time, just thinking of how good it was to have someone, how peaceful the three felt together, and how close they already were, which amazed all three. And really, all three just felt good in general, like the future was bright simply because they were all together. Eventually, Jiraiya got up and went out to the living room, telling the two to get ready for the day. Naruto and Hinata got dressed, both feeling slightly shy changing around one another, but both felt it was right. They dressed in their normal training clothes, Naruto in his orange jumpsuit and Hinata in her baggy coat, then they looked at one another and laughed at the normalcy of it. Naruto came over and put his arms around her, and the two hugged gently, then kissed, then went to the living room to rejoin Jiraiya. Jiraiya. While the two preteens were getting ready, Jiraiya opened the apartment door and let in a rather stiff Hayashi. The two sat down to discuss the final details of their plan while the two kids were missing. How did Naruto take it? Hayashi asked. He seemed more than happy to have Hinata here. I doubt you could tear the two apart now. I actually walked in on them tickling one another. That was amusing. Then they dragged me into it, Jiraiya said, trying, and failing, to keep his smile hidden. You don't seem to have minded, Hayashi teased, grinning. No, I didn't. It was fun to feel like a kid again. That, and what Naruto told me didn't hurt either. Hayashi raised an eyebrow. He told me I'm like a father to him. Hayashi looked surprised. I know. I think I'm the only one to really stand up for the kid, so he sees me as a line of defense in a way. And he's never had that, so he's decided I'm precious to him. Me and Hinata both, he sees us as his family now. I doubt you would be able to get him away from either of us without either killing us or coming close to death yourself. Hayashi smiled. He was really happy for his daughter to have found such a caring boy. He'll be a good man. A good husband and father, someday. Jiraiya nodded. So it seems our plan has worked then? It's bringing Hinata out of her shell, making Naruto calm down, and bringing family to them both. Yes, it's worked better than either of us thought it would. I'm glad to see it coming to fruition. Hayashi laughed at Jiraiya's awkward formality. I'm glad to see it's worked too. Hinata is a sweet girl, and she deserves the best. I'm happy to see she's found it. Jiraiya nodded, pondering. I suppose this will make it easier when I have to take him away from the village. Which will be soon, by the way. Hayashi nodded, understanding what Jiraiya meant. You'll miss her, won't you? Of course I'll miss her. She's my daughter after all. But I'm confident that you and Naruto will keep her safe and that she'll be loved. Will she return to me a Hyuga? I rather doubt it. But if you request it, I will see to it she does. I'd rather she did. If not, at least promise me you'll alert me so I can be at their wedding. I want to give her away myself. Jiraiya burst out laughing, then nodded. That's the least I can do, I suppose. I'm sure Hinata would want you to be there. And Naruto would probably be proud as well to have that occur. I would be there as Naruto's father, of course, so I would be very glad to see you there when I danced with Hinata. Hayashi couldn't help it, he burst out laughing at that image. I only wish my wife could be there to dance with Naruto at the same time. He looked a little sad at that thought, then remembered how close his wife had been with Kushina. He grinned. I'm sure their mothers would be proud of them. Jiraiya nodded, then Hayashi continued, I better get going. I look forward to hearing from you again, Master Jiraiya. And don't forget. Hayashi bowed slightly and left. Just as the door closed behind him, the door to Naruto's room opened. Naruto and Hinata. As they came out, they found Jiraiya standing in the kitchen area, looking at the door, as if pondering something. Naruto jabbed Hinata's side gently and gestured at the distracted pervert. She giggled and nodded. Naruto gestured her to go behind him and Naruto slunk over in front of Jiraiya. Hinata giggled when she was directly behind him, on the far side of the couch from him, then Naruto jumped and shoved him backward. Jiraiya stumbled and fell onto the couch, Naruto on top of him, then Hinata jumped at the two of them, and suddenly, the three found themselves in the middle of round 2 of their tickle fight from earlier. Soon, the three were giggling just as loud and hard as they had been before, tears streaming from their eyes as they tried to remember how to breathe. After the three calmed down, they sat and laughed together a while, Naruto holding Hinata and Jiraiya smiling at the two of them happily. Come on you two lovebirds. Let's get some breakfast so we can go train, Jiraiya said, smiling. Naruto got up and made eggs, bacon, toast, and juice for the three of them. They all sat down to eat, then Jiraiya teased, I'm surprised you know how to make all this, Naruto. I thought all you ate was ramen. Naruto grinned at the jab, but answered seriously. I only eat ramen so much, because Tucci and I accept me. I feel safe there, and that's rare for me. I learned how to cook a lot of stuff from some recipe books I found in my father's house. I don't know how or why, but I've always had a natural knack for cooking. He shrugged, smiling sadly as he thought of all the meals he'd made alone just for himself. Then smiled a little happier when he realized that he'd always have someone to share meals with now. I'm just glad you two like it. They both nodded, then the three finished their meals in comfortable silence, each one thinking of how bright their future together looked. After breakfast, they left and headed to a nearby training ground, Naruto and Hinata walking hand in hand, Jiraiya just behind them. watching to make sure they weren't bothered by any of the villagers. No one bothered them, not now. Between Jiraiya's presence and Naruto's now-known heritage, they wouldn't dare. And Hinata's activated Byakugan didn't hurt either. For her part, she was glaring at any villager who had the nerve to glare at Naruto. Naruto smiled, knowing these two people, so precious to him, were defending him from the villagers. Naruto kept thinking about his dream of being respected, of having people care, and he knew he'd more than achieved his dream. He had Hinata, Jiraiya accepted him, the villagers didn't like him, but they weren't bothering him anymore. He was happy. Then he had a thought. He needed a new dream. With no dream to keep him focused, what reason did he have to keep training? He shook his head, putting that thought out of his head for now. He'd think about that later. Elsewhere in Fire Country. Unbeknownst to Naruto, some 100 miles away, a young-looking woman with blonde hair and pigtails, and another with dark hair laying straight down to her shoulders, walked through a rather seedy part of a small commercial town. The brunette carried a small pig in one hand and a pink briefcase in the other. The briefcase was full of small denomination bills, quite a few of them at that. Tsunade, the blonde, knew there was about 2,000 ryo in there. Shizune, the brunette, was nervous. She knew that look on Tsunade's face. And she rather doubted that briefcase would last. Tsunade was called the legendary sucker for good reason. She had no luck or skill at gambling, and yet she couldn't seem to stop. Tsunade knew that her luck was bad. She had long since gotten used to that. Yet she couldn't stop. She knew it was an addiction, just like her drinking, and both of those were addictions Shizune was determined to break in her. She chuckled at Shizune's nervousness, knowing what she was thinking. She also knew if Shizune was right, which she probably was, her money would run out, but her luck in something else would be good. That's why she gambled with her money. As long as she had bad luck in that, she always had good luck in other areas of her life, which, to her, were far more important. After all, she had a more or less inexhaustible fortune. They entered a seedy gambling hall, Tsunade anxious to start, Shizune apprehensive, of course. Tsunade sat down and opened her briefcase, turned in her money, got her chips, and got ready to start. Shizune saw the looks on everyone's faces, and her apprehension grew even more. They knew who Tsunade was, of course. Damn it. Now the money was really going to leave fast. Half an hour later. Tsunade was getting worried. She had started with about 2,000 ryo, but now she had well over 300,000. She hadn't lost a single hand since she sat down. Shizune seemed pleased, but Tsunade knew when she got lucky in gambling, her luck in other things went to hell really fast. She had never hit it this big before. What in the world was going to happen? It wasn't good, that was for damn sure. And to hit it this big at cards? Okay, what the hell? That never happened. Not for her, anyway. Tsunade kept a calm face on as she cashed out and took off, barely able to carry her cash. Shizune knew something was up, but didn't dare ask. She just followed Tsunade. The two knew one another well enough that words were unnecessary. Shizune knew when Tsunade hit it big like this, something bad happened every time. And this was Tsunade's biggest haul yet. Naruto and Hinata. Meanwhile, totally unaware of the bad luck that was coming their way, Naruto and Hinata were training together. They had both mastered the Rasengan by now, and Naruto was working hard to get all of the elements into it at once. He had gotten the order down after experimenting a bit, but the last element he had to put in was earth, which was his hardest single element, especially for this. So of course he was having trouble with that. He had gotten wind, lighting, fire, and water into it several times, just to have it fall apart as he tried to add earth. Hinata was working on getting her water chakra into hers at the same time, since that was her affinity. Naruto smiled at her and showed her the four-element one he had at present. It glowed an odd shade that resembled purple more than anything else. Then he focused a bit more and started to try to get the earth into it again. He saw Hinata smiling at him, and his confidence rose. He smiled wider and focused harder, and suddenly, his Rasengan was white. He gasped, but kept it there. He then turned and shoved it into a nearby rock, which totally disintegrated. He turned and looked at Hinata, grinning like mad, and she took her water version to the stream nearby, and sure enough, the water reacted. It was spinning around her as she stood on it, reacting to the power of her Rasengan. She smiled at him, then plunged it into the water, grinning as the whirlpool grew around her as her water chakra made the water spin around itself like mad. She dispelled the jutsu, then ran to Naruto and embraced him. He responded in kind, and the two stood together like that for a while, just enjoying being close to one another. Jiraiya wanted to interrupt them, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. They had been training hard all morning, and the two deserved a moment to themselves. He just stood back and smiled, realizing he thought of them as his family. Naruto his godson, and Hinata his goddaughter, more or less. He smiled, thinking of what would come when they were married. Kids, of course, and Jiraiya giggled to himself thinking of what that meant, getting a slight nosebleed. He smiled after that, thinking of becoming a grandfather, even if it was indirectly. Then he reminded himself how young his two charges were, and realized he had a few years to wait. A short time later, Jiraiya told them they'd be leaving fairly soon to train, just the three of them. He told Hinata he'd teach her everything he could about the gentle fist, and he told Naruto he'd teach him everything he knew, from ninjutsu to every seal he'd ever performed. When they asked why, he simply replied, "You'll need it, both of you." He then refused to say any more about it. Naruto decided to be happy about this. He was going to spend a long time with just his precious people, his father figure and Hinata. He smiled, once again thinking of how bright the future was. Then his thoughts returned to his dark past, and he knew he'd have to face that and tell the other two about it sooner or later, but he decided later was plenty soon enough. Hinata was ecstatic. She had only just gotten out of the Hyuga compound and moved in with Naruto, her dreams coming true in ways she never imagined, and now this? It was just too much. Once she had learned of everything, she smiled, blushed, got a nosebleed, and fainted. Some 10 minutes later, Naruto finally woke her up, laughing slightly about her fainting spell. He grinned at her. "I thought you were over that," he joked. "I did, too," she responded, "but apparently not." "Did you hurt yourself or something?" "Your nose is bleeding." He sounded worried. Jiraiya and Hinata both laughed at this, then laughed harder when he looked at them both with confusion written on his face. "What's so funny?" he humphed, annoyed. This, of course, sent the other two into all new levels of laughter. Eventually, even though he had no idea why they were laughing, the sight of Jiraiya and Hinata doubled over laughing got to be too much, and Naruto burst out laughing as well. Shortly they were all rolling on the ground, holding their sides and laughing like maniacs. The rest of that day passed in relative peace, the three of them bonding together and becoming much like a true family. Naruto was happy, Hinata felt at peace, and Jiraiya was content. They all felt the future was bright, and they all knew that whatever was coming, good or bad, they would face it together. Little did they know that their little group wouldn't face it alone. The morning after Naruto, Hinata, and Jiraiya had their bonding session, the three of them found themselves summoned to the Hokage's office. The three bowed to Sarutobi. "You called for us, sensei?" Jiraiya asked. "Yes, Jiraiya. I wish to tell you that the three of you are going to be assigned another team member. I have spoken to the young man and he is aware of your special nature, Naruto, and he accepts it. Team 7 is gaining a member from his team, and his team is being dissolved. Incidentally, it's one of your old teammates, Hinata. Your team has been disbanded. Shino will be joining you too, and Kiba will take Naruto's place on Team 7, Sarutobi said all this as clearly as he could. He was somewhat worried about how the three would react to this. Understood, Lord Hokage, the three spoke as one. Naruto thought a moment, then said, "So Shino knows, huh?" Sarutobi nodded. "How did he find out?" "I told him. Given the reaction of your former teammates, I wanted to make sure whoever you were teamed with now, you would be accepted by that person. Shino sees you as a comrade and one who is worthy of his loyalty regardless of what is inside you, so I doubt you'll have any problems with him." Naruto nodded. He was glad to have another true friend. He smiled. Things were finally looking up for him. He put an arm around Hinata gently, she smiled and blushed, not really caring who saw what they were doing. "Thank you, Lord Hokage," Naruto said. "Okay, now, this is not exactly normal procedure, but since all three of you were enrolled in the chunin exams, and since the finals are individual anyway, I'm going to allow you to compete. However, there is a mission I need the three of you to complete before then," Sarutobi said, feeling every one of his years weighing on his bones. He sighed. He hated doing this to them, but he had no choice. "I need the four of you, counting Shino, to find and bring back my successor. I have made my choice, and I need the four of you to retrieve her. I would normally not send you on missions before the exams, but I need her here before then, so I have no choice. Your squad is the only one available. Obviously, this means you have a rather tight time limit. I need you to find her and get her back here within 2 weeks. Oh, and Naruto, that promise I made you still stands. I just realized that I need to retire a bit sooner than that. The three nodded, then bowed slightly. Naruto was slightly disappointed, but he understood, Sarutobi was an old man, after all. They turned to leave to find Shino and get on their way. Naruto was the only one who spoke. In his old goofy way, he grinned at the Hokage and said, "Leave it to me, old man. I'll find her and get her back here for you." Then all three were gone, leaving Sarutobi chuckling and shaking his head. In spite of himself, he was glad to see Naruto coming back to his old ways, at least a little. Half an hour later, Naruto arrived at the gate of the village, grinning when he saw the other three waiting for him. Hinata had found Shino at his home, and then all three had met up and gone to the gate to wait for Naruto. Hinata smiled shyly at him, Shino nodded, and Jiraiya gave him a kindly smile. Jiraiya waited till his whole team was there, then spoke. "Let's move out, kids." Moments later, all four of them were jumping through the trees, from branch to branch. Naruto and Hinata naturally gravitated toward one another. Shino was used to being by himself, so he was off by himself a little, and Jiraiya was ahead of the others as he led the way. He was, after all, the only one who knew where they were going. Naruto reached out and took Hinata's hand in his, smiling shyly. Hinata smiled back, blushing a little, and the four of them traveled like that, Naruto and Hinata linked, and Shino and Jiraiya each absorbed in their own thoughts. The small group was glad it was early in the morning. It was still cool, and it gave them all day to travel if necessary. Evening. They had traveled all day, Naruto and Hinata clinging to one another's hand, Jiraiya leading the way, and Shino simply jumping with the others. Soon enough, just as the sun was beginning to meet the horizon, they arrived at a small town. Jiraiya's spy network had told him this is where Tsunade was. She was their target. He chuckled, thinking of the time he had spent with her when they were both kids. He looked briefly at Naruto and Hinata. The look Naruto had in his eyes reminded him of himself when he had looked at Tsunade. Hinata, for her part, looked pleased. He smiled and led the team into the town. Within 10 minutes, they had secured 2 rooms in a hotel. Naruto and Hinata would share one, Shino and Jiraiya the other. The four divided into their rooms. Shino laid down almost immediately and fell asleep. He was used to rising and setting with the sun, so he was tired, especially after their long trip. Jiraiya had heard already that Tsunade was in town just now, so he went out to find her. Naruto and Hinata went into their room and sat down together. Naruto took Hinata's hand gently, she smiled at him and blushed. They had been together all day, and neither had said a word. Just being together was enough. Now, they were alone. Naruto sighed. That was a long trip. Hinata nodded. Yes, it was. I'm really tired. I'm sure my legs will be stiff tomorrow. And my back is killing me. Naruto couldn't help it, he grinned at that. Hinata noticed his grin. What? Would you like a massage? He asked her, smiling lovingly. Hinata gasped, no one had ever asked her that before. Naruto saw the shocked look on her face and explained. I've been told I have magic hands. I gave Sakura a massage once when she pulled a muscle and she said it was really good. That was before, his voice trailed off. He didn't want to talk about that. Not yet, anyway. Hinata saw that he was upset and rushed to reassure him. I'd love one, Naruto. I just wasn't expecting you to ask that. No one's ever offered me that before. Naruto smiled. Do you trust me, Hinata? She gave him an odd look, then nodded. I trust you with my life, Naruto. Now and always. But why do you ask that? Naruto laid a hand on her leg gently, she gasped at the sudden contact, then he started to massage her leg and she could feel her muscle relax under his hand. She gave him an odd look. You said your legs were sore too. I was wondering if I could try something. It's something I've never done before, but always wanted to. Hinata gave him a questioning look, he continued, I've always wanted to give someone a full body massage. She gasped. She loved the very idea. She thought about his hands running all over her body, touching her everywhere. She grinned at the idea, even if she did get a slight nosebleed, the idea was very pleasant to her. She looked up at him, wiping the blood from her nose, smiling, she nodded. That sounds very nice, Naruto. He chuckled. There is a bit of a catch though, he told her. She looked nervous. Jiraiya. On the other side of town, he was entering a small bar, thinking he'd likely find his target in a place like this. He looked up and sure enough, there she was. He chuckled at his luck. That was easy. Tsunade, he called out, pointing a finger at her. Tsunade looked up. She couldn't believe it. Her old teammate was standing there pointing at her. She stood up and cried out, Jiraiya? He chuckled and walked over to her. He sat down in the booth she was sharing with Shizune and Tun Tun. Hello, Tsunade, Shizune, he said, nodding to each woman. I'm glad I found you. What do you want, Jiraiya? She asked, flustered and annoyed to have been found by her old teammate. She didn't hate him, she just didn't like being caught off guard like this. Alright, I'll get right to the point. You've been chosen as the 5th Hokage, along with 3 Genin. I have been sent to retrieve you and bring you back to the village, Jiraiya said. Tsunade was shocked, then laughed. Her immediate reaction was to refuse, but then she thought about it. She remembered the 2 people she had truly loved, both dreaming to be Hokage. She thought of them and her grandfather, who had been the first Hokage, and eventually, she nodded. I'll do it, but on one condition, she said softly. Name it, Jiraiya said, smiling. He had thought she'd refuse at first, so this was an improvement. No more research. Jiraiya gasped at her answer. Then he thought a moment. That's fine. I won't have time to do any research anyway. I'll be too busy training my team, he said, chuckling. Tsunade looked surprised. Jiraiya explained. I said I was sent here with a trio of Genin. One of them is Minato's son. Tsunade looked shocked at this. He continued. Then there is Hinata Hyuga, heir of that clan, and Shino Aburame, heir of his. They are a team, and I am their sensei. So I won't have time to do my research anyway, I'll be too busy taking care of them and training them. He then explained the situation with Naruto and Hinata, and why Shino was on their team. Tsunade chuckled, thinking of Minato's son being with Hayashi's daughter. She knew both their mothers had wanted just that, so she was happy for them. Alright. I'll come back and do the job. I take it you all are in a hotel tonight? Jiraiya nodded, telling her the hotel and room numbers where they were and who was in each room. She raised an eyebrow at Naruto and Hinata being in a room alone, but she remembered that they were engaged and let it pass. She chuckled, thinking of the 2 of them living together as well, and realized that she was going to have an interesting situation there. Jiraiya had also told her that Hayashi was aware of the 2 of them living together and that he approved of it. She nodded, pondering that. After half an hour of making plans, the old teammates separated. Jiraiya returned to his hotel room, where he found Shino sound asleep, and Tsunade went to pack her things from her own room. They had agreed to meet the following morning at the main gates of the town to head back to Konoha. Naruto/Hinata. Hinata looked at Naruto, confused and slightly concerned. A catch? That's what he'd said, there was a catch. She knew that had seemed too good to be true. His hands on her, relaxing her, yeah, that was too much. There had to be a catch. Okay. What's the catch? She asked nervously. She watched Naruto's eyes. He was looking at her body, seemingly nervous himself. Well, when I give a massage, I need to touch the skin directly. It wasn't bad when Sakura hurt herself, because she hurt her arm, but if I'm going to do your whole body, he trailed off again, nervous. He thought she'd hate him for this, but he really wanted to do it. What is it, Naruto? She asked. She had an idea what he had in mind, but she wasn't sure. The idea of what she thought he was talking about made her giddy with excitement. She thought he wanted her to be naked, but she wasn't about to say that. If she was wrong, he'd think she was a pervert or something. Well, if I'm going to massage your whole body, I'll need you to be naked, he said, looking away from her and blushing. I promise I won't look. I just need your skin to be bare so I can massage you. She blushed. She was right. He did want her to be naked. And he'd said it. She thought a moment. Yes, she wanted this. She wanted him to see all of her. She was nervous thinking about it, but it excited her, too. She turned and looked at him, seeing hope and fear in his eyes. She smiled at him. All right. And it's okay, you don't have to look away, Naruto. He blushed, bright red. Are you sure, Hinata? I don't want you to feel uncomfortable. She nodded. All of me is yours, Naruto. So it's perfectly all right for you to see me. They were both blushing as they thought of this. Naruto came to her and kissed her gently. She responded, kissing him back. The two put their arms around one another and kissed each other over and over, never getting any deeper or harder, simply enjoying the contact between one another. After several minutes, the two pulled back, Hinata having ended up sitting on Naruto's lap during the kiss. They smiled at each other. Naruto turned and pulled out a scroll. He laid it on the floor and touched 2 spots on it. It spread out in a seal and covered the walls of the room, along with the windows and the door. He turned to Hinata. Now no one can see or hear into here. They'll see a black room if they look, and they'll hear nothing. I'm glad I learned that seal, he explained, chuckling. Hinata kissed him again, gently, then she turned away from him. Naruto watched her. She felt his eyes on her as she slowly removed her jacket. She slowly lifted her top off, then unfastened and removed her bra as well, tossing both things aside. Then she turned to face him slowly, blushing. She had her arms covering herself. She slowly lowered her arms, exposing herself to him. Naruto blushed, surprised at how well-developed Hinata was. He almost looked away, but instead he looked up into her eyes and smiled. She blushed deeper and smiled back. After hesitating a moment, she bent down and removed her pants and panties as well. He blushed, looking at her whole body. Hinata looked at him. What? She asked, seeing him looking at her. You're so beautiful, Hinata, Naruto said, smiling at her. He came to her, took her in his arms, and kissed her again. She responded eagerly, her body excited by him being so close to her and by her nudity. Naruto led Hinata to the bed and laid her down on her stomach. She turned her head to the side, getting as comfortable as she could. Naruto went over to her, marveling at her body. He couldn't understand why she hid her beauty in her baggy clothes like she did, but, in a way, he was glad she did. That way, only he would ever see her this way. Naruto chuckled and got onto the bed. He straddled her and rested his weight on her butt. He reached up, put his hands to her shoulders, and started massaging her. His hands gripped her shoulders and rubbed, gently but firmly. She could feel a slight bit of his chakra going into her and her muscles relaxed under his hands. She moaned in pleasure, feeling her stiff muscles relax. Naruto smiled at her. He kept massaging her shoulders and leaned down and kissed her back. She stiffened a little in surprise, then relaxed even more. He moved to her arms, massaging every muscle in them until they relaxed completely. Hinata sighed in pleasure, feeling her body become like putty. She squirmed under Naruto's touch, not trying to move, just feeling very good. He moved from her arms to her back, down her back, and eventually to her legs. Everything he touched seemed to relax and become like putty in his hands. Hinata gasped when his hands trailed over her butt, but she didn't move. He moved onto her legs and massaged them. After about 20 minutes of this, Naruto moved up and started to gently rub her back, not massaging now, just rubbing gently. He leaned down and started to kiss her back, his lips following his hands. Hinata shivered under his touch, feeling her body react to him. She felt warm inside, her body getting excited, a warmth touching every part of her body, starting deep in her core. She shivered, her eyes closed in pleasure. Her mind drifted, and she suddenly realized something. She wanted him. All of him. She knew what sex was, but she'd never desired it before. Now, with Naruto's hands on her and his lips caressing her back, she did. She wanted him inside her. Naruto was feeling something similar. He had had an erection from time to time, yes, but he had never been around a girl like this before. He didn't know how sex even worked. All he knew was that every time he touched Hinata's body, his body reacted. Her reaction said she enjoyed what he was doing, so he kept doing it. His lips caressed her back, his hands rubbed up and down her back and sides, and his legs rubbed against hers gently. Hinata decided what she would do. She wanted him, but she wasn't ready for that just yet. She did want to see his body though. She shifted and tried to roll over. He felt her move and lifted off her. She rolled onto her back, then pulled him down and kissed his lips deeply. Naruto reacted eagerly. Hinata, blushing deeply, reached up and unzipped Naruto's jacket. She slipped it off him. He blushed, but let her do what she wanted. She lifted his top off, then marveled at the sight of his trim chest, his firm abs. She blushed, then put her hands on him, feeling his firm muscles. Naruto closed his eyes, the pleasure of her touch coursing through him. His body was reacting to her, and he knew he wanted her, but he didn't want to make her do anything she wasn't ready for. After a few moments, Hinata reached down and removed his pants and boxers as well. He rolled off her and laid by her, not wanting her to feel uncomfortable from having his body against hers. Hinata's eyes roamed over Naruto's body. She blushed, her body desiring his, but knowing it was too soon. She came to him, putting her arms around him and pulling his body to hers. She felt his erection against her and blushed. She didn't do anything about it, but she loved feeling it against her. He seemed uncomfortable, but he didn't pull away. He put his arms around her as well, smiling at her. Hinata whispered, "It's okay, Naruto. I want this. Just no more than this for now, okay?" Naruto nodded. "I'm surprised you'd even do this much." "Thank you, Hinata." She sighed in pleasure and cuddled up to him. She laid her head against his chest. Naruto held her close and closed his eyes. She saw this and knew they both were tired. She closed her eyes as well. Both were asleep within moments, neither bothering to pull a blanket or sheet over themselves. The next morning, Naruto awoke slowly. He realized after a moment that he was naked. Then he realized he wasn't alone. Hinata, also naked, was in his arms. After a moment, he remembered the night before and smiled, rubbing her back. Hinata slowly stirred in his arms. She looked up at him, coming to the same realizations as him and remembering the previous night. The two kissed and held one another close, not even caring they were both naked. That is, until they heard the door open. Naruto looked and saw the very last person he wanted to see at that exact moment. Jiraiya was standing there, mouth having fallen open, eyes trailing over both people in the room. Hinata squeaked and Naruto threw himself over her, covering her body from Jiraiya's wandering eyes. "Get out of here, Jiraiya!" Naruto shouted. The old man came to his senses. Well, as much as Jiraiya ever does that, anyway. "Way to go, kid. I knew I trained you well," Jiraiya said proudly, flashing Naruto 2 thumbs up. Naruto flew out of bed, not bothering to cover himself, and shoved Jiraiya out the door. He slammed the door and locked it, then turned back to Hinata. Her face looked to be on fire from blushing, and she was covering herself with the sheets from the bed. Naruto went over to her and slowly moved the sheet aside. He smiled at her. "It's okay, Hinata. I'm here." He took her in his arms. She shuddered from embarrassment, shivering, then put her arms around Naruto. Somehow just knowing he was there made it better. After a few moments, both had calmed down and Naruto got up to retrieve their clothes. He picked up Hinata's clothes first and handed them to her. She dressed slowly, almost reluctant to hide from him again. Then she watched him dress, thinking again how amazing his body felt against hers. Hinata turned to Naruto. "Naruto?" He turned to her, a questioning look on his face. She came and wrapped her arms around him. She pressed her face to his chest. Naruto wrapped his arms around her. "I love you so much, Naruto." "I love you too, Hinata. I always will," he said, smiling. The two stood together, wrapped in one another's arms for a few moments. Then Naruto smiled at Hinata. "We should check on Jiraiya. I hit him pretty hard." The two opened their door and looked out into the hallway. Naruto shook his head and Hinata smiled at how protective Naruto had gotten of her. Jiraiya was embedded in the wall a solid foot and was out cold. The two went over and pulled the old pervert out of the wall and carried him into the room he had shared with Shino. Shino was already up and dressed. The three genin sat and waited for Jiraiya to wake up. Naruto and Hinata told Shino what had happened, leaving out their own nudity. Shino seemed impressed by Naruto's strength. It would seem you're very protective of Hinata, Naruto, Shino said. Naruto nodded. This is logical. You are protective of your mate, a very admirable trait. Hinata blushed when Shino called her Naruto's mate, but the young couple both smiled and stepped closer to one another. As the three were sitting there, Naruto and Hinata holding one another, the door opened again. Naruto got between Hinata and the new arrival. He took up a defensive position as two women stepped in. One had blonde hair and two pigtails and a green dot on her forehead. The other was a trim brunette carrying a pig. Naruto thought about what he was looking at a moment and, realizing the blonde was Tsunade, he cracked up laughing. Tsunade looked at him. She was shocked at his appearance until she realized he must be Minato's son. So you're Naruto, huh? And the young lady behind you must be Hinata. She turned to Shino. And you're Shino, yes? Shino nodded. Naruto nodded through his laughter, then fell onto the floor, still laughing. Okay, Naruto, what is so funny? Naruto, still laughing and holding his sides, gasped out, your hair is in pigtails, and she's carrying a pig. Upon hearing this, Hinata started giggling, and soon enough, Tsunade and Shizune both started laughing too. Before long, all of them except Shino and Jiraiya were rolling on the floor laughing. It took 10 minutes before the four could stand and breathe normally again. Once they could, Naruto explained to Tsunade and Shizune why Jiraiya was unconscious, again leaving out his and Hinata's nudity. Tsunade explained to everyone that she had agreed to come back to the village, so their mission was a success. The three genin smiled and congratulated one another. Their first mission together, an A rank at that, was a success. After Jiraiya awoke, the team checked out of the hotel, and the 6 people and 1 pig started their trek back to Konoha. This was all for now. Thank you for watching, I hope you liked it and that you will be back for more. Please like, share and subscribe. See ya.